Alright guys, I'm in the middle of replacing the power steering pump on my 96 K1500, and I wanted to show this because this is very intricate, and it probably looks intimidating, but it really is extremely simple. I was truly intimidated, but for where I am right now, looking back, it wasn't that much work. So I bought a PSC Power Steering Components SP1401F off the 4-Wheel Parts website. It's supposed to be like 1600 PSI replacement, stock replacement for this truck, and it is in fact not stock replacement. Now, when I bought this pump, it said direct fitment for 1996 Chevrolet K1500 series. And since then, and since my review, they have changed it to say what you see here now. Stock replacement. The clocking is incorrect for the pump in the reservoir. Obviously, that's a different reservoir. As you can see, this is the stock pump here, stock reservoir. After discovering this, I went back onto their website and read here where it is for 62 to 79 GM pickups. It is in fact not actually ever designed to go in a 96 Chevy, at least the reservoir is not. But I will show you here how you can use the pump and exclude the reservoir. And I was pretty frustrated, but I realized that people do replace just the pump, so I figured I'd give it a try and put this one in here. And you in fact can put a PSC pump in a stock reservoir. There's a few things you got to do it correctly. First things first, once you pull all this stuff out, just don't lose any of the parts. There's some parts and a spring in here. It was pretty easy for me just to leave the spring and the little plunger in there and not take it out. That's what it looks like right here. This is the plunger out of the old one and the spring. But just leave those in there. And there's a bolt here and a bolt here. That's what these look like here. They go through the back into those two threaded ports right there. Pull those out, pull this block off, leave the plunger in. The block looks like this. Really quite simple. And then just take a rubber mallet. I use the rubber side of this framing hammer and just tap on the reservoir, hold on to the pump and tap all the way around, and the reservoir should come off pretty easy. It just has a seal. It's just kind of friction fit at that point once you get the bolts out. And slide the new one into your stock reservoir and tighten everything back down. But as far as this piece goes here, these are actually different. The pump that I bought was for a 60 to 76 power steering system, and so the inside was different. This is the one off of the stock pump, and as you can see, it's got a pretty big hole in there. Not sure what that does, but it's got a large hole. And this one here has a lot smaller hole, and it gets even narrower farther in there you go. And the PSC pump comes with this brass flare adapter that sits down in the inside of this, which would be for a different style line, like a flare version, like a brake line kind of setup. But in this 96, it has some weird looking steel line that's crimped all weird, funny looking, with a rubber O-ring like that. And so obviously with that brass piece in there, it will not work. You can't even get the thread started. And I didn't want to use this one because the hole is so much larger on the inside. So I got this little lag bolt and just pounded it into the brass and used my impact and just started spinning on it, and it just pulled it right out. And now that is the correct mating sealing surface as the stock pump in your 96, and you have now a 1600 PSI pump ready to bolt into your 96 K1500 quite simply, actually. Yeah, not too bad. And also on this pump, where the return goes back into the reservoir, it is too far in the center, and so it hits on this bracket. You'd almost have to cut half the bracket away just to make it fit on there, and it still won't go on. It still will not fit behind this aluminum bracket. If you try and line these holes up, you physically can't, because the neck runs into this part of the AC bracket mount. So you can't use that reservoir they send with it. And while I'm at it, a quick tech tip. I've gone through literally about 5 different power steering lines, and on the 6th one, my Napa guy, who's a good friend of mine, is like, all right, just give me this line that you brought in, and I'll go make a hydraulic line. So he went in the back and he just cut a piece of rubber hydraulic hose like you'd find on a skid steer or a piece of equipment like a backhoe or whatever that's rated for a lot more PSI, and he crimped on these threaded compression fittings. So there's a little brass guy in there that slides over the top of the steel line, and you slide the steel line inside of the brass thing inside of this and tighten this nut down as far as you can without stripping it, and it compresses onto the steel line and seals it up, and that's on both ends. So you can use the steel line from your original or recently replaced hydraulic pressure power steering line and put a heavy duty hydraulic line in place of the stock power steering line. I recommend making sure that both ends are tight into the truck and then slipping these on top and then tightening them down, because if you tighten it down out on the bench and bring it in here, it's not likely that the clocking will be correct pointing into the pump and into the gearbox. Okay, for more information to help you put this in, I've gotten this far. You put the bracket on the back on the bench. I had this slid over it and realized that the stock 96 bolts come on this truck may not be the right thread to go into this new old-fashioned style pump. This pump is again for a 60 to late 70s pickup, so that would obviously mean that they didn't have metric on the trucks back then, and they do on the 90s. So quick comparison, I had this bolt threaded in here really nicely, no problems. I can show you, this is a grade 8 bolt from our bolt bin. Clearly this is an American thread and that is an American made pump, so they clearly do not mesh up very well. Well, anyways, you know how to do this. You try and match the threads, and obviously they're not the same, so this bolt will not work, but we can use this for the right length. And this is our bolt bend, so I can come over here and pick out the one bolt we don't have so that I can bolt this new bracket onto this new pump, or the old bracket onto the new pump with the correct size and length bolt. Alright, there you have it. I got it all the way in, fully installed. It's always better to put a long bolt in there, maybe some all thread, whatever you got, and then push it on with the nut. Don't use the threads of the bolt in the shaft of the pump. That's a good way to strip them out, and then you start with very minimal threads most likely. And but if you can take a long bolt, thread it all the way in, and then tighten the nut and some big fat washers. These are some thick ones so they can span out to the larger diameter of the pulley. Thread the bolt in all the way to tighten the nut up to it and push the pulley on with the nut and make sure that the bolt isn't spinning too much. Worked pretty good for me. I went right on, used a little blaster for some lubrication just so it didn't fight me too bad. And then I take an old shitty belt and wrap it around the pulley over itself, and then like just hold it against this, or you can clamp it on something or tighten it down under a bolt, or I just hold onto it with my hand. Hold onto it like this and then put my thumb on the pump like that, and then as you're tightening, the belt will hold the pulley from spinning, and it's pretty easy. Everything's all fully done, everything's installed. I think it's a good idea once you get the high pressure hooked up to take your low pressure, that's this one right here, it's just a return from the gearbox, and cap the gearbox, cap the little metal nipple on the back with just a little cap you can get from the parts store, and then put an extension on that return line and run it down underneath the truck and clamp it to the side of a bucket, and so you can watch it and put a light on down there, and then get in the truck and turn the wheel back and forth all the way lock to lock about 10-15 times, or until the fluid comes out clear. And then continue to keep the reservoir full of fluid while you do that, so that you're flushing is what you're doing. You're flushing new fluid, and any debris or metal flakes or whatever that might be in the gearbox from your old pump going bad will get rinsed down into the bucket and then discarded into the trash. Now I just got to put the belt on, put everything back together, and see what it feels like.